Marcus Thompson adjusted his security badge one more time as he walked through the automatic doors of Riverside Corporate Plaza. At 42, he cut an unassuming figure in his navy blue uniform. Average height, graying temples, and the kind of quiet demeanor that made people overlook him entirely, which was exactly how he preferred it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble lobby as Marcus began his routine security rounds. Riverside Corporate Plaza housed 12 floors of various businesses, from law firms to tech startups, and Marcus had been protecting this building for exactly 3 months. His previous job at a smaller office complex had ended when the company downsized, leaving him scrambling to find work that would cover his daughter's college tuition and his mother's medical bills. Marcus wasn't bitter about starting over. At his age, he'd learned that pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. The pay at Riverside wasn't great, but it was steady. And after years of uncertainty following his military discharge, steady was exactly what he needed. The elevator dinged, and out stepped 3 men in expensive suits. Marcus recognized them immediately: Tyler Brennan, Jake Morrison, and Connor Walsh. They worked for Pinnacle Investment Group on the 8th floor, one of the building's most prestigious tenants. All 3 were in their late 20s, drove cars that cost more than Marcus made in 2 years, and had the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. "Morning, gentlemen," Marcus nodded politely as they passed. Tyler, the apparent leader of the group, barely glanced at him. Yeah, whatever. Marcus had dealt with their type before. Young, successful, and convinced the world revolved around them. He'd served alongside men like these in the military, officers who'd bought their way into positions they hadn't earned. The difference was, in the Army, actions had consequences. In the corporate world, money and connections could shield you from almost anything. As the weeks passed, Marcus began to notice a pattern. The 3 men from Pinnacle would arrive each morning around 8:30, always together, always loud. They'd make comments about the help just loud enough for Marcus to hear, joke about how anyone could do security, and generally treat him like he was invisible. It started small. Tyler would deliberately drop his coffee cup near Marcus's security desk, smirking as he walked away. Jake would accidentally bump into Marcus in the hallway, then act like it was Marcus's fault. Connor had a particular talent for making passive-aggressive comments about Marcus's uniform, questioning whether it was regulation or suggesting he looked unprofessional. Marcus endured it all in silence. He'd learned in military that some battles aren't worth fighting, and he needed this job. Every morning, he reminded himself why he was here. His daughter Sarah was a junior at State University studying pre-med, and his mother lived in an assisted living facility that cost more per month than most people's rent. He couldn't afford to lose his temper over some entitled kids who thought they were better than him. The harassment escalated gradually. Tyler started leaving messes near Marcus's desk: spilled coffee, scattered papers, even once a half-eaten sandwich that attracted ants. When Marcus cleaned it up without complaint, Tyler grew bolder. He began timing his disruptions for when other building tenants were around, clearly enjoying the audience. "Hey, security guy," Tyler called out one Tuesday morning in front of a group of lawyers from the 3rd floor. "You missed a spot." He pointed to a piece of lint on the floor that he'd obviously placed there himself. Marcus bent down and picked it up without a word. The lawyers looked uncomfortable, but none of them said anything. In the corporate world, keeping your head down was survival. Jake and Connor fed off Tyler's energy. They started a game where they'd walk past Marcus's desk and rate his performance out loud. "I'd give him a 4 out of 10 today," Connor would say, uniforms wrinkled. 3 out of 10, Jake would counter. "He's not even standing up straight." Marcus had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, roadside bombs, and firefights that lasted hours. He'd seen friends die and held the line when everything around him was falling apart. But somehow the daily humiliation from these three men was wearing him down in a way that combat never had. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning in late October. Marcus was reviewing the security logs when Tyler approached his desk with a manila envelope. "Hey, old man," Tyler said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "I need you to deliver this to the law firm on 3. Think you can handle walking up 2 flights of stairs without getting winded?" Marcus looked up from his paperwork. "I can." "Take the elevator, sir." "Sir?" Tyler laughed. "Did you hear that, guys?" "He called me sir." Jake and Connor appeared beside him, grinning like hyenas. "What are you, some kind of military wannabe?" "I can deliver your envelope," Marcus said quietly. Reaching for it, Tyler pulled it back. "Actually, you know what? I don't think you can. You look pretty weak to me. Are you sure you're qualified for this job? I mean, what if there's actually an emergency? What if someone breaks in? Are you going to protect us with your clipboard?" The lobby had gone quiet. Other tenants were pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, a familiar sensation he'd worked hard to suppress. "I'm qualified," he said simply. "Really?" Tyler stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a joke. A tired old man playing dress-up in a security uniform. I bet you've never been in a real fight in your life." Marcus's hands tightened imperceptibly on his desk. Tyler had no idea how wrong he was, but Marcus couldn't afford to show it. He needed this job. He needed the paycheck. He needed to stay invisible. "I'll deliver your envelope," Marcus repeated. Tyler tossed the envelope on the desk with theatrical disdain. "Maybe you should consider a career change, old man. Something more suited to your abilities, like greeting people at a department store." As the 3 men walked away, laughing and high-fiving each other, Marcus stared at the envelope. His reflection in the desk's glass surface showed a man who looked defeated, worn down by months of systematic humiliation. But behind his tired eyes, something was stirring, something he'd kept carefully locked away since leaving the military. Marcus picked up the envelope and headed for the elevator. As he walked, he thought about the men who just humiliated him. They saw a weak security guard approaching middle age, someone they could push around without consequence. They had no idea that the quiet man in the navy blue uniform had spent 15 years as a special forces operator, that he'd been trained in combat techniques most people couldn't imagine, that he'd led missions in some of the world's most dangerous places. They thought he was weak. They thought he was a joke. They thought he was nothing. They had no idea how wrong they were. The elevator doors closed, and Marcus allowed himself a small, grim smile. He'd been patient for 3 months, taking their abuse and staying professional. But patience had its limits, and Marcus Thompson was quickly approaching his. The following week brought changes to Riverside Corporate Plaza that Marcus couldn't have anticipated. Building management announced they were implementing new security protocols following a break-in at a similar complex across town. Marcus found himself attending mandatory training sessions, learning updated procedures, and working longer hours to accommodate the enhanced security measures. The additional responsibility came with a modest pay increase, but more importantly, it meant Marcus had legitimate reasons to be present throughout the building during business hours. He could now conduct security checks on every floor, review camera footage, and interact with tenants in ways that went beyond his previous desk-bound duties. On his first comprehensive floor inspection, Marcus discovered something that would prove crucial in the coming weeks. The building's security system was more sophisticated than he'd realized. Hidden cameras covered every angle, motion sensors tracked movement in restricted areas, and the central monitoring station had capabilities that rivaled some military installations he'd worked with overseas. David Chen, the building's IT manager, gave Marcus a tour of the security nerve center. "Most guards never see this room," David explained as they entered a space filled with monitors and recording equipment. "The previous company just wanted someone to sit at the desk and look official. But management wants to take security seriously." Now, Marcus studied the array of screens showing every corridor, elevator, and common area. His military training kicked in automatically, analyzing sightlines, blind spots, and potential vulnerabilities. "How long do you keep the footage?" 6 months, David replied. "Everything's digital now, stored on secure servers. You can access any camera from your desk computer if you need to investigate an incident." This information changed everything. Marcus realized that every interaction with Tyler, Jake, and Connor had been recorded. Every insult, every deliberate mess, every moment of harassment was preserved in digital format. But more than that, he now had the tools to observe and understand his tormentors' patterns in ways they couldn't imagine. That afternoon, Marcus returned to his desk with a new sense of purpose. He pulled up the camera feeds on his computer and began studying the 3 men from Pinnacle Investment Group. Their behavior when they thought no one was watching revealed far more than their public performances. Tyler Brennan, Marcus learned, was not as confident as he appeared. The young man spent considerable time in the bathroom, often talking to himself in the mirror, practicing conversations, and building himself up before important meetings. His expensive suits couldn't hide the nervous energy that consumed him when he thought he was alone. Jake Morrison had a different problem entirely. Marcus watched him take frequent trips to his car in the parking garage, always returning with a subtle change in demeanor. The pattern was unmistakable to someone with Marcus's experience. Jake was using drugs, probably cocaine, to get through his workday. Connor Walsh proved to be the most interesting of the 3. While Tyler and Jake were busy with their own issues, Connor spent his time gathering information about other people in the building. He would linger near conversations, take photos of documents left on desks, and maintain detailed notes about everyone he encountered. He was building files on people, collecting leverage for future use. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus began to understand that the harassment wasn't random cruelty, it was a systematic campaign designed to establish dominance and control. The 3 men weren't just bullies. They were predators who had identified Marcus as an easy target and were using him to practice their intimidation techniques. The realization crystallized during a particularly revealing incident on Wednesday evening. Marcus was conducting his final security rounds when he noticed lights still on in the Pinnacle Investment Group offices. The cameras showed Tyler, Jake, and Connor in their conference room, but they weren't working. Instead, they were engaged in what appeared to be a strategy session. Marcus adjusted the camera angle and increased the audio pickup. What he heard made his blood run cold. "The security guard is perfect," Tyler was saying. "He's weak, he's desperate, and he won't fight back. We can use him to test tactics before we move on to bigger targets." "What about the Henderson account?" Jake asked. "You think we can pressure them the same way?" "Absolutely," Connor replied, consulting his notes. "Henderson's son has a gambling problem. The daughter's in rehab. They're vulnerable. We start with small pressure, build it up gradually, just like we've been doing with the security guy." Marcus felt sick. They weren't just tormenting him for entertainment. They were using him as a practice target for what appeared to be a sophisticated extortion scheme. The Henderson Group was one of the building's largest tenants, a family-owned business that had been operating for 3 generations. Tyler continued, "The beauty of starting with the security guard is that nobody cares about him. He's invisible. We can push him as far as we want, learn what works, and then apply those techniques to people who actually matter. Plus," Jake added with a laugh, "if he breaks, who's going to believe him?" A washed-up security guard against 3 successful investment brokers. We have credibility, connections, and resources. He has nothing. Marcus turned off the audio feed and leaned back in his chair. The full scope of what he was dealing with had just become clear. These weren't just spoiled rich kids playing cruel games. They were calculating predators who had identified him as the weakest link in their practice chain. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated their target. Over the next few days, Marcus used his newfound access to conduct thorough intelligence gathering. He reviewed weeks of security footage, documenting every instance of harassment and building a comprehensive picture of the three men's activities. He discovered that they had been systematically targeting other people in the building as well. A cleaning lady they'd reduced to tears, a delivery driver they'd humiliated, and several junior employees from other companies who'd been subjected to similar treatment. The pattern was always the same. Identify someone with limited power or resources, escalate pressure gradually, and exploit their vulnerability for personal gain or entertainment. Marcus began to see himself not as a victim, but as the latest in a long line of people. These men had deliberately chosen to torment. The breakthrough came when Marcus discovered that Connor kept detailed files on everyone in the building. Using his security clearance, Marcus accessed Connor's computer during an evening when the three men were at a company event. What he found was disturbing. Dossiers on dozens of people, including personal information, financial details, family problems, and potential pressure points. The Henderson file was particularly comprehensive. Connor had documented the family's business struggles, their son's gambling debts, and their daughter's addiction treatment. He'd even included photographs taken with a telephoto lens and copies of private correspondence that had somehow been obtained illegally. Marcus photographed everything, storing the evidence on a secure drive. But more importantly, he now understood that he wasn't just dealing with workplace bullies. He was up against sophisticated criminals who were using the building as their hunting ground. The stakes had just gotten much higher than anyone realized. As Marcus prepared to leave that night, he reflected on the irony of the situation. Tyler, Jake, and Connor thought they were predators stalking easy prey. They had no idea that they had chosen to target someone who had spent 15 years hunting far more dangerous predators in some of the world's most hostile environments. The hunter had become the hunted, and they didn't even know it yet. 3 weeks after discovering the conspiracy, Marcus found himself living a double life that was taking its toll in ways he hadn't anticipated. During the day, he maintained his facade as the submissive security guard, enduring escalating abuse from Tyler, Jake, and Connor. During the night, he worked as a shadow operative, gathering evidence and building a case that would expose their criminal enterprise. The psychological strain was immense. Every morning, Marcus had to suppress 15 years of combat training and allow these men to humiliate him in front of other tenants. His military instincts screamed at him to fight back, to end the harassment with swift and decisive action. Instead, he forced himself to remain passive, knowing that his larger mission required maintaining his cover. The toll on his personal life became apparent when Sarah called him on a Tuesday evening. His daughter's voice carried concern that she tried to hide behind casual conversation. "Dad, you sound exhausted. Are you okay?" Marcus was sitting in his apartment, surrounded by surveillance photos, financial records, and evidence of the conspiracy he'd uncovered. He'd been working 18-hour days for weeks, and the strain was showing. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just busy. At work. Maybe you should take a vacation. You've been working so hard since you started the new job." Marcus looked at the photos spread across his coffee table. Images of Tyler meeting with known criminals, Jake's drug transactions, Connor's illegal surveillance activities. Taking a vacation wasn't an option. Too many people were at risk. "I'll be okay. How are your classes going?" Sarah's voice brightened as she talked about her pre-med studies, but Marcus could hear the underlying worry. His daughter was perceptive, and she sensed that something was wrong. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was sacrificing his relationship with the person he was trying to protect. The situation at work deteriorated further when Tyler decided to escalate his campaign of harassment. The young man seemed to sense that Marcus was becoming more withdrawn, and rather than backing off, he interpreted it as weakness to be exploited. "You know what I think?" Tyler announced to the lobby one Thursday morning, ensuring maximum audience. "I think our security guard here is having some kind of breakdown. Look at him. He's jumpy, tired, always looking over his shoulder. Maybe he's not mentally stable enough for this job." Marcus felt every eye in the lobby turn toward him. Several tenants who had witnessed months of Tyler's harassment looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. Corporate politics demanded silence, and everyone understood the unspoken rule. "I'm fine," Marcus said quietly, not looking up from his desk. "Are you, though?" Tyler pressed. "Because I've been watching you, and you seem different. Distracted, like you're not really present. That's dangerous in security work, don't you think?" Connor stepped forward, consulting his ever-present notebook. "Actually, I've been documenting some concerning behaviors. Late arrival, early departure, personal phone calls during work hours. Maybe we should report this to building management." The threat was clear. They were preparing to have him fired, removing him from the building, and eliminating his access to the evidence he'd been gathering. Marcus realized that his investigation had reached a critical point. He was running out of time. That evening, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He contacted his former commanding officer, Colonel Robert Martinez, now working as a federal investigator. The conversation was brief and encrypted, conducted through channels that Marcus hadn't used since leaving the military. "I need help," Marcus said simply. "I've uncovered something big, but I'm in deep and running out of time." "What kind of big?" Martinez asked. "Financial crimes, extortion, potentially human trafficking. 3 suspects operating out of a corporate building. I have evidence, but I need backup." There was a long pause before Martinez responded. "Send me what you have. If it's credible, I'll see what I can do. But Marcus, be careful. If these people are as dangerous as you think, they won't hesitate to eliminate threats." The warning proved prophetic. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work to find his access codes had been changed. When he tried to log into the security system, his credentials were invalid. David Chun, the IT manager, looked uncomfortable when Marcus asked about the problem. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I got orders from upstairs. Your access has been temporarily suspended, pending a security review." "What security review?" "Someone filed a complaint about your behavior. They're questioning whether you're fit for duty." Marcus felt the walls closing in. Without access to the building's systems, he couldn't gather additional evidence or monitor the conspirators' activities. Worse, he was now completely vulnerable to their attacks. The suspension lasted 3 days, 3 days during which Tyler, Jake, and Connor moved forward with their plans against the Henderson family. Marcus watched helplessly as they began implementing the same pressure tactics they'd perfected. On him, anonymous threats appeared in the Henderson offices. Their business partners received calls questioning the family's financial stability. Personal information about the family members was leaked to local media. When Marcus finally returned to work, he found that his role had been fundamentally changed. His access was restored, but he was now confined to the lobby during business hours, prohibited from conducting floor inspections or accessing the advanced security systems. Someone had effectively neutered his ability to investigate. The psychological warfare intensified. Tyler began timing his harassment for moments when Marcus was dealing with legitimate security issues, deliberately disrupting his work and making him appear incompetent. Jake started spreading rumors about Marcus's mental health, suggesting to other tenants that he was unstable and potentially dangerous. Connor documented every interaction, building a file that painted Marcus as an unfit Employee. The personal cost became unbearable when Marcus's mother called from the assisted living facility. Eleanor Thompson's voice was weak but concerned. Marcus, honey, they're saying I might need to find a new place to live. Something about payment issues? Marcus's blood ran cold. What kind of payment issues? They won't tell me exactly. Just that there are questions about the account. I'm scared, Marcus. I don't want to be homeless. That evening, Marcus discovered that his mother's care facility had received an anonymous tip questioning the source of Marcus's income. The facility's administration, concerned about potential legal issues, had frozen his mother's account pending investigation. Without proof that the payments were legitimate, they couldn't continue providing care. The message was clear. Tyler, Jake, and Connor were now targeting his family directly. The game had moved beyond workplace harassment into a systematic campaign designed to destroy his life completely. Marcus sat in his apartment that night, staring at the evidence he'd collected. He had enough to expose the conspiracy, but it would require revealing his own intelligence-gathering activities. The three men had maneuvered him into an impossible position: fight back and face criminal charges for unauthorized surveillance, or remain silent and watch them destroy everything he cared about. The hunter had become the hunted, and the trap was closing fast. But Marcus Thompson hadn't survived 3 tours in Afghanistan by giving up when things got difficult. As he reviewed his options, a grim smile crossed his face. Tyler, Jake, and Connor had made one crucial mistake in their escalation. They had threatened his family. That changed everything. The gloves were about to come off. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon when Marcus received a call that shattered his carefully maintained composure. Dr. Patricia Williams from Sunset Manor called with devastating news about his mother. Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid we need to discuss your mother's situation urgently. Due to the ongoing payment investigation, we've been forced to discontinue her specialized medication regimen. Her condition has deteriorated significantly, and she's been asking for you constantly. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. I'll be right there. There's something else, Dr. Williams continued, her voice heavy with concern. Your mother received some visitors yesterday. 3 young men claiming to be from a financial services company. They upset her greatly, asking questions about your employment, and suggesting she might be involved in fraudulent activities. Security had to escort them out, but the damage was done. She's been confused and frightened ever since. The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in the empty lobby. Tyler, Jake, and Connor had crossed the final line. They had directly targeted his elderly mother, a woman suffering from early-stage dementia who couldn't understand or defend herself against their psychological warfare. For the first time in months, Marcus allowed his military training to surface. His breathing became controlled and measured. His posture shifted from the slouched stance of a defeated security guard to the alert bearing of a special forces operator. The transformation was subtle but profound. The sheep's clothing was beginning to slip, revealing the wolf underneath. Marcus left work immediately, driving to Sunset Manor with a clarity of purpose he hadn't felt since leaving the military. When he arrived, he found his mother in a state of confusion and distress that broke his heart. Eleanor Thompson, who had once been a strong and independent woman, now seemed fragile and lost. Marcus, she whispered when she saw him. Those men, they said terrible things. They said you were in trouble, that I might have to leave. I don't understand what's happening. Marcus held his mother's hand, feeling the weight of every decision he'd made over the past months. His patience, his restraint, his careful investigation. All of it had been rendered meaningless by these 3 predators who saw no boundaries in their pursuit of power and control. It's going to be okay, Mom, I promise. That evening, Marcus made a series of phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Colonel Martinez, uploading every piece of evidence he'd gathered to a secure server. The second was to Rebecca Henderson, the daughter of the family being targeted, warning her about the conspiracy and providing her with crucial information about Connor's surveillance activities. The third call was to his daughter Sarah. "Dad, you sound different," Sarah observed immediately. "What's wrong?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I need you to know that I love you, and everything I've done has been to protect you and your grandmother. If something happens in the next few days, I want you to remember that." "Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I can't explain everything right now, but there are some bad people who've been threatening our family. I'm going to stop them, but it might get complicated." Sarah's voice was sharp with concern. "Should I come home?" "No, stay in school. This will be over soon." On Monday morning, Marcus arrived at Riverside Corporate Plaza with a new sense of purpose. He had spent the weekend preparing for what would likely be his final confrontation with Tyler, Jake, and Connor. The evidence was secured, his family was warned, and backup was in place. Now it was time to end the game on his terms. The three men seemed to sense the change immediately. When Tyler approached Marcus's desk with his usual swagger, something in Marcus's demeanor made him hesitate. "You look different today, old man," Tyler said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Did you finally accept that you're beaten?" Marcus looked up from his paperwork, and for the first time in months, he made direct eye contact. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The response was so unexpected that Tyler actually took a step back. Jake and Connor flanked him, but they too seemed unsettled by the subtle transformation in their usual victim. "We've been thinking," Connor said, consulting his notebook with less certainty than usual. "Maybe it's time for you to find a new job. Somewhere more suited to your limitations." "Actually," Marcus replied, his voice calm and steady, "I've been thinking the same thing about you three." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For months, these men had grown accustomed to Marcus's submission, his quiet acceptance of their abuse. This new version, confident, direct, unafraid, was completely outside their experience. Tyler tried to reassert control. "Excuse me? I don't think you understand who you're talking to. We could have fired you with a single phone call, could you?" Marcus asked, standing up slowly. The movement was fluid and controlled, nothing like the beaten-down security guard they knew. "I'm curious, who exactly would you call?" The question confused them. They had always assumed their power in the building was absolute, their connections unassailable. The idea that someone might challenge that assumption had never occurred to them. Jake stepped forward aggressively. "Listen, you pathetic—" "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying an authority that made Jake stop mid-sentence. "You listen. For months, you've assumed you knew who I was. You saw a security guard and decided he was weak. You saw someone who needed a job and assumed he was helpless. You made a lot of assumptions, and every single one of them was wrong." Connor opened his notebook, perhaps hoping to find some leverage, some piece of information that would restore their dominance. "We know all about you, Thompson. Your financial problems, your family situation, my 15 years in Special Forces." Marcus asked quietly, "My 3 tours in Afghanistan? My expertise in surveillance, intelligence gathering, and eliminating threats. Did you know about that, Connor?" The notebook slipped from Connor's hands, pages scattering across the marble floor. The three men stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time, which in many ways, they were. "I've been watching you," Marcus continued, his voice never rising above conversational level, "all of you, for weeks. I know about the Henderson extortion scheme. I know about Jake's drug dealing. I know about Connor's illegal surveillance operation. I know about Tyler's money laundering through the Cayman accounts. I know everything." Tyler's face had gone pale. "You're bluffing. You're just a security guard." Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't the defeated expression of a broken man. It was the predatory grin of someone who had been hunting much more dangerous prey than they could imagine. Am I? He asked. Would you like to see the evidence? The photographs? The financial records? The audio recordings? Is all of it properly documented and already in the hands of federal investigators? The lobby had gone completely silent. Other tenants, sensing the shift in dynamics, watched from a safe distance as the hunter finally revealed himself to his prey. The three men who had spent months tormenting Marcus suddenly realized they weren't predators at all. They were amateurs who had unknowingly declared war on a professional soldier, and the war was about to end in their complete destruction. The silence in the lobby stretched for what felt like an eternity. Tyler, Jake, and Connor stood frozen, their minds struggling to process the complete reversal of everything they thought they knew. The man they had tormented for months, the supposedly weak security guard they had used as target practice for their cruelty, had just revealed himself to be something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Marcus remained perfectly still, watching their faces as the full implications sank in. He could see the exact moment when each man realized the magnitude of their mistake. Tyler's arrogance crumbled into fear. Jake's drug-fueled bravado evaporated into panic. Connor's calculated confidence dissolved into terror. "You're lying," Tyler whispered, but his voice carried no conviction. "You can't be. You're just trying to scare us." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small device, a digital recorder that had been capturing their conversation. With deliberate precision, he placed it on his desk where all three men could see it. "Agent Martinez," Marcus said clearly into the device, "the subjects have been informed of the investigation. Recommend immediate implementation of Phase 2. The recorder crackled with static before a voice responded. "Copy that, Operative Thompson. Federal units are standing by. Execute at your discretion." Connor's face went white. "Operative Thompson, you're working with the FBI?" "Among others," Marcus replied calmly. "Did you really think your little operation would go unnoticed indefinitely? Financial crimes, extortion, illegal surveillance, drug distribution. You've been busy, but not as careful as you thought." Jake took a stumbling step backward. "This is impossible. We checked you out. You're nobody. You're just a washed-up security guard with money problems." Marcus's smile was cold and professional. "You checked the cover identity. Marcus Thompson, divorced security guard, struggling to make ends meet. That part was real, the struggle, the need for money, the family obligations. But you never dug deeper. You never asked why a man with my qualifications would take a minimum wage security job. What qualifications?" Tyler demanded, though his voice was barely above a whisper. "Master Sergeant Marcus Thompson, United States Army Special Forces. 15 years active duty, specialized in intelligence gathering, infiltration, and elimination of high-value targets. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, 1 classified operation I can't discuss. Expert marksman, advanced combat training, fluent in 4 languages, and holder of the Distinguished Service Cross." Marcus paused, letting the information sink in before continuing. "After my discharge, I spent 2 years working private security for Fortune 500 companies, investigating corporate espionage and financial crimes. When the FBI identified Riverside Corporate Plaza as a hub for criminal activity, they needed someone inside. Someone who could maintain deep cover while gathering evidence." Connor's notebook lay forgotten on the floor, its pages scattered like the remnants of their shattered confidence. "The Henderson family, you knew we were targeting them." "I've been protecting them from day one," Marcus confirmed. "Every move you made, every threat you issued, every piece of intelligence you gathered, I documented it all. Rebecca Henderson has been working with federal investigators for weeks, feeding you false information and recording your extortion attempts." Tyler's legs seemed to give out. He slumped against a marble pillar, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face ashen. "How long have you known about your criminal activities?" "Since my first week. About your plan to use me as practice for bigger targets? Since the beginning. You see, gentlemen, I let you torment me. I encouraged it, actually. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment of cruelty, it all served a purpose. You thought you were breaking me down, but you were actually revealing yourselves. Marcus stood up slowly, his movements precise and controlled. The transformation was complete now. Gone was any pretense of the defeated security guard. In his place stood a career soldier, a professional operative who had successfully completed one of the longest undercover assignments of his career. The beauty of deep cover, Marcus explained, is that people see what they expect to see. You expected to see a weak, desperate man, so that's exactly what I gave you. You never questioned why I never fought back, why I absorbed punishment that would have broken most people, why I seemed to know so much about building security and surveillance systems. Jake was shaking now, whether from fear or withdrawal. Marcus couldn't tell. What happens now? Marcus checked his watch with military precision. In approximately 3 minutes, federal agents will arrest you for multiple felonies including extortion, money laundering, drug distribution, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Your offices are being raided as we speak. Your financial accounts have been frozen. Your communications have been monitored for weeks. Connor made a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. You can't prove anything. It's your word against ours. We have lawyers, connections, family money. Had, Marcus corrected. Past tense. Your family money won't help when the IRS discovers the tax evasion schemes. Your lawyers won't be much use when they're facing disbarment for their own criminal activities. And your connections? Marcus gestured toward the lobby entrance where several men in dark suits were now visible through the glass doors. Your connections are about to become very interested in saving themselves. The federal agents entered the building with professional efficiency. Marcus recognized Agent Sarah Chun, Colonel Martinez's partner, leading the team. She approached his desk with a slight nod of acknowledgement. Sergeant Thompson, she said formally. Are the subjects ready for processing? Yes, ma'am. All 3 are present and accounted for. Audio evidence has been collected, and they've been informed of the investigation. Tyler, Jake, and Connor watched in stunned silence as the agents moved into position around them. The reality of their situation was finally becoming clear. They weren't victims of some elaborate prank or misunderstanding. They were criminals who had been caught by a sophisticated federal investigation. Tyler Brennan, Agent Chun announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and extortion." The handcuffs clicked with metallic finality. As Jake and Connor received the same treatment, other tenants in the building watched from doorways and windows. The 3 men who had terrorized the building for months were being led away in chains, their empire of fear and intimidation crumbling around them. Marcus packed his security equipment methodically, his work at Riverside Corporate Plaza officially complete. David Chun approached him with a mixture of awe and confusion. "I can't believe it," David said. "All this time, you were undercover FBI?" "Not the FBI," Marcus corrected. "Military intelligence, on loan to a federal task force. The FBI needed someone who could maintain cover under extreme psychological pressure. Turns out, surviving Taliban interrogation techniques makes dealing with spoiled rich kids relatively easy." As the federal vehicles pulled away with their prisoners, Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Tyler, Jake, and Connor had spent months believing they were predators hunting easy prey. They had no idea they were actually sheep who had wandered into a wolf's den. The operation was complete. The criminals were captured, and justice was finally being served. But for Marcus Thompson, this was just another successful mission in a career dedicated to protecting the innocent from those who would exploit them. The weak security guard had been a lie. The truth was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. 6 months after the arrests, Marcus Thompson stood in the witness box of the federal district courthouse. delivering testimony that would seal the fate of Tyler Brennan, Jake Morrison, and Connor Walsh. The courtroom was packed with victims, journalists, and law enforcement officials who had worked on what had become known as the Riverside corporate conspiracy. The three defendants sat at separate tables with their attorneys, a far cry from the arrogant young men who had once terrorized an office building. Prison jumpsuits had replaced expensive suits, and their faces bore the hollow look of people who had lost everything they thought made them powerful. Marcus's testimony was methodical and devastating. He presented months of recorded conversations, financial evidence, and documented instances of extortion and harassment. The jury listened in fascination as he described his undercover operation, the careful construction of his cover identity, and the systematic way he had gathered evidence. While enduring psychological torture, the defendants believed they were conducting a campaign of intimidation against a vulnerable target, Marcus explained to the prosecutor. In reality, they were providing a complete record of their criminal activities to a trained intelligence operative. Every insult, every threat, every moment of cruelty was being documented and analyzed. Defense attorneys tried to discredit his testimony, suggesting that his undercover role was entrapment or that his military background made him an unreliable witness. But Marcus had been trained to testify in high-stakes situations, and his calm professionalism undermined every attack on his credibility. The trial revealed the full scope of their criminal enterprise. Tyler's money laundering operation had funneled millions through offshore accounts. Jake's drug distribution network had supplied cocaine to dozens of corporate executives across the city. Connor's surveillance and blackmail scheme had targeted over 50 individuals and families. Most shocking was the revelation that their treatment of Marcus had been a deliberate testing ground for techniques they planned to use against high-value targets. FBI analysts had found detailed notes in Connor's files describing how psychological pressure could be gradually increased, how to identify and exploit personal vulnerabilities, and how to maintain plausible deniability while destroying someone's life. When the verdicts were read 3 days later, Tyler received 15 years for racketeering and money laundering. Jake got 12 years for drug trafficking and conspiracy. Connor, whose surveillance and blackmail activities were deemed the most invasive, received 18 years in federal prison. As the defendants were led away in shackles, Tyler caught Marcus's eye one final time. The young man who had once called him weak and pathetic now looked at him with something approaching respect and absolute terror. Marcus felt no satisfaction in the moment. Justice had been served, but the experience had extracted its own price from everyone involved, the media. Attention following the trial was intense but brief. Marcus granted one interview to a local newspaper, focusing on the importance of protecting vulnerable people from workplace harassment and corporate crime. He refused movie deals, book offers, and speaking engagements, preferring to return to the quiet life he had carefully constructed. But his world had changed in ways both profound and unexpected. The successful completion of the Riverside operation had restored his reputation within military and intelligence circles. Job offers poured in from federal agencies, private security firms, and corporations seeking someone with his unique skill set. More importantly, his family relationships had been transformed by the experience. Sarah flew home from college immediately after the trial, embracing her father with a new understanding of who he really was. "I always knew you were tough, Dad," she said as they sat in his apartment. "But I never realized you were basically a real-life action hero." Marcus laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd enjoyed in months. "I'm just a guy who's good at his job, sweetheart. The hero part is just good marketing. Don't downplay it," Sarah insisted. "You spent months being tortured by those men to protect innocent people. You sacrificed your own well-being to serve something bigger than yourself. That's exactly what a hero does." His relationship with his mother had also deepened through the crisis. Eleanor Thompson's condition had stabilized once proper medical care was restored, and the stress of the federal investigation had actually improved her clarity in unexpected ways. She seemed to understand that her son had been involved in something important and dangerous, and she was fiercely proud of his service. "My Marcus always was a protector," she told the nurses at Sunset Manor. "Even as a little boy, he couldn't stand to see people being picked on. I'm not surprised he grew up to catch the bad guys." The financial benefits of the operation were substantial but unexpected. Federal law allowed Marcus to claim a percentage of the assets seized during the investigation. Tyler's offshore accounts alone yielded over $8 million in recovered funds, of which Marcus received a finder's fee that secured his family's financial future permanently. Sarah's college tuition was no longer a concern, his mother's. Medical care was guaranteed for life. For the first time since leaving the military, Marcus had true financial security, not because he needed the money, but because his service to his country continued to provide value. Professional opportunities materialized quickly. Colonel Martinez offered him a position leading a new task force focused on corporate espionage and white-collar crime. The FBI wanted him to develop training programs for undercover operatives. Private security firms offered seven-figure contracts for his expertise, but the most meaningful opportunity came from an unexpected source. Rebecca Henderson, whose family had been protected by Marcus's intervention, approached him with a different kind of proposal. "We want to start a foundation," she explained over lunch at an upscale restaurant that would have intimidated the old Marcus Thompson. "Something focused on protecting workplace harassment victims and investigating corporate crime. We need someone to run it who understands both sides, the victim experience and the investigative process." Marcus considered the offer carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A non-profit organization with serious funding and federal support. You'd train investigators, develop protection protocols for vulnerable workers, and coordinate with law enforcement on corporate crime cases. Basically, you'd be doing what you did at Riverside, but legally and with unlimited resources." The Henderson Foundation for Workplace Justice launched 6 months later with Marcus as its executive director. The organization quickly became a model for corporate crime investigation, combining victim advocacy with sophisticated intelligence gathering. Marcus's first case involved a tech startup where senior executives were systematically harassing female employees. His second exposed a construction company using immigrant workers as forced labor. His third uncovered a healthcare corporation defrauding Medicare through elaborate billing schemes. In each case, Marcus employed the same techniques he had perfected. At Riverside, careful observation, methodical evidence gathering, and the patience to let criminals reveal themselves completely before striking. But now he worked with full legal authority and unlimited resources, making him exponentially more effective than he had been as a lone undercover operative. A year after the Riverside trial, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his foundation offices. David Chun, the former IT manager from the corporate plaza, had come to thank him personally. "You saved that building," David said simply. After those three were arrested, the whole culture changed. People started speaking up about harassment. Management implemented real accountability measures. It became a place where decent people could work without fear. Marcus nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. That was always the goal, not just to catch the bad guys, but to prove that bullies can be stopped when good people stand together. As David left, Marcus reflected on the transformation his life had undergone. A year ago, he had been a struggling security guard, enduring daily humiliation while fighting to pay his bills. Today, he was a respected investigator running a nationally recognized organization, financially secure and professionally fulfilled. But the most important change was internal. The quiet man who had absorbed months of abuse to serve a greater purpose had discovered something profound about himself That true strength isn't the ability to dominate others, but the courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Marcus Thompson had started as a sheep in wolf's clothing, pretending to be weak while hiding his true nature. He had ended as something far more powerful, a guardian who used his strength not to intimidate, but to ensure that the weak would never again be prey for predators like Tyler, Jake, and Connor. The bullies had called him weak, never realizing they were teaching a masterclass in justice to someone who had dedicated his life to protecting the innocent. They had been wrong about everything, and the world was safer because of it. 2 years after the Foundation's establishment, Marcus found himself standing before a congressional subcommittee on corporate accountability. The hearing room was filled with lawmakers, journalists, and advocates who had gathered to discuss new legislation aimed at protecting workplace harassment victims. Mr. Thompson, the subcommittee chairman began, your organization has investigated over 200 cases of corporate misconduct in just 24 months. What patterns have you observed in these criminal enterprises? Marcus adjusted his tie, a far cry from the ill-fitting security uniform he had once worn. Congressman, predators always target those they perceive as powerless. They look for people who are isolated, financially vulnerable, or professionally dependent. The key to stopping them is understanding that their perception of weakness is often their greatest miscalculation. The questioning continued for 3 hours, covering everything from legislative recommendations to training protocols for law enforcement. Marcus's testimony would eventually contribute to the passage of the Corporate Accountability and Worker Protection Act, landmark legislation that fundamentally changed how workplace harassment cases were investigated and prosecuted. After the hearing, Marcus walked through the halls of Congress with Senator Elizabeth Morgan, who had sponsored the bill. Your work has literally changed lives, she told him. The Riverside case became the blueprint for dozens of similar investigations nationwide. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The real heroes are the victims who found the courage to come forward. I just provided them with the tools and support they needed to seek justice. That evening, Marcus returned to his hotel room to find several messages waiting. The first was from Sarah, now in her final year of medical school and engaged to a fellow student she had met during a volunteer medical mission. Dad, I saw you on C-SPAN today. You looked so comfortable up there, like you were born to testify before Congress. I'm proud of you for turning something so painful into something that helps so many people. The second message was from Colonel Martinez, who had been promoted to Director of Military Intelligence and was calling from the Pentagon. Marcus, we have a situation developing in the private sector that requires someone with your specific skill set. A major defense contractor is suspected of selling classified technology to foreign governments. The operation would require deep cover infiltration at the executive level. Interested? Marcus smiled as he deleted the message without responding. Those days were behind him now. His war was being fought in courtrooms and corporate boardrooms, using evidence and legislation rather than surveillance and subterfuge. The third message was from an unexpected source, Tyler Brennan, calling from federal prison. Mr. Thompson, Marcus, I don't know what to call you. I've had 2 years to think about what happened, what we did to you, what you did to us. I wanted to say, I understand now why you did what you did. We were monsters, and we thought being monsters made us strong. You showed us what real strength looks like. I'll never forgive myself for what we put you through, but I'm grateful you stopped us before we destroyed more lives. Marcus played the message twice, searching for any hint of manipulation or false remorse. But Tyler's voice carried a brokenness that seemed genuine, the sound of someone who had truly confronted the reality of their actions. It was perhaps the first honest thing Tyler had ever said to him. The final message was from his mother, calling from Sunset Manor, where she now lived in a private suite with round-the-clock medical care. Marcus, honey, Mrs. Patterson showed me the newspaper article about your speech in Washington. I may not understand all the details, but I know my son is doing important work. Your father would be so proud. I love you." Eleanor's condition had continued to improve, aided by the best medical care money could buy and the peace of mind that came from knowing her son was safe and successful. The stress of their previous financial struggles had been contributing to her cognitive decline, and removing that burden had allowed her natural resilience to emerge. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the same lobby where his transformation had begun, but this time as a guest speaker for the building's new harassment prevention training program. Riverside Corporate Plaza had become a model workplace, implementing comprehensive policies and procedures that protected employees at every level. The security desk where he had once endured daily humiliation was now staffed by Janet Williams, a former military police officer who commanded respect through professionalism rather than fear. The changes went beyond personnel. The entire culture of the building had shifted toward accountability and mutual respect. "The key lesson from the Riverside case," Marcus told the assembled employees, "is that harassment thrives in silence and dies in daylight. When people speak up, when colleagues support each other, when management takes reports seriously, predators lose their power." After his presentation, Marcus was approached by several employees who had worked in the building during the Tyler, Jake, and Connor era. Many of them apologized for not speaking up when they witnessed the harassment, expressing guilt over their silence. "Don't carry that burden," Marcus told them. "You are operating within a system designed to protect the aggressors and silence the victims. The important thing is that you're here now, committed to ensuring it never happens again." Among the crowd was David Chun, who had become the building's director of security technology. His innovative monitoring systems had been adopted by corporate facilities nationwide, creating transparent accountability measures that protected both employees and employers. "You know what the real irony is?" David asked as they walked through the renovated lobby. "Tyler, Jake, and Connor thought they were teaching you about power, but they were actually receiving a master class in it from someone who understood that true power comes from service, not domination." Marcus's reputation in law enforcement and intelligence circles had grown exponentially. The Henderson Foundation received consultation requests from agencies worldwide, and Marcus found himself training operatives in techniques he had developed through necessity and refined through experience. His methods were studied at Quantico, taught at the FBI Academy, and incorporated into military intelligence training programs. The Thompson Protocol became standard procedure for long-term undercover operations, involving psychological pressure and systematic harassment. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Veterans Administration asked Marcus to develop a program helping former military personnel transition to civilian careers, particularly those struggling with the adjustment from combat environments to corporate settings. "Many veterans feel lost in the business world," Marcus explained to a group of recent military retirees. "The structure, the hierarchy, the mission clarity of military service doesn't exist in civilian employment. But the skills you developed in service, discipline, attention to detail, the ability to remain calm under pressure, those are invaluable in any environment." The program, called Mission Transition, became wildly successful, placing hundreds of veterans in meaningful careers while helping employers understand the unique value that military experience brings to their organizations. On the 5th anniversary of the Riverside arrests, Marcus received an invitation that completed the circle of his transformation. Harvard Business School asked him to deliver the keynote address at their graduation ceremony, speaking to the next generation of corporate leaders about ethical leadership and moral courage. Standing before 1,000 future executives, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 5 years ago, he had been a struggling security guard, enduring daily humiliation while secretly gathering evidence that would expose a criminal conspiracy. Today, he was addressing the future leaders of American business about the importance of protecting the vulnerable and standing up to corruption. Leadership is not about power over others, he told the graduates. It's about using whatever power you have to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Real strength isn't measured by your ability to dominate, but by your willingness to serve something greater than yourself. As Marcus left the podium to thunderous applause, he thought about Tyler, Jake, and Connor, still serving their sentences in federal prison. They had seen him as weak because he endured their abuse without fighting back. They never understood that his restraint wasn't weakness. It was the ultimate demonstration of strength, the discipline of a professional soldier who knew that the mission was more important than personal satisfaction. The weak security guard had been an illusion, but the strength that sustained that illusion was absolutely real. And that strength continued to protect people, 5 years later, in ways that Tyler, Jake, and Connor could never have imagined. Marcus Thompson had proven that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you, right up until the moment you show them how wrong they were. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.